So Tom Betthauser is a multimedia artist and software engineer, originally from San Francisco. He's taught painting, life drawing, and multimedia art at colleges across the state, including the College of Marin, West Valley College, or College of Marin, West Valley College near San Jose, and Saracoso College outside of Mojave, California. In addition to his studio practice, he also maintains a number of ongoing web-based projects geared toward developing resources for visual artists and art students. So,
thanks for reading that verbatim. But
yeah, well, you know.
No, it works.
It's funny. I have some colleagues who are very like, they really rely on the etiquette and decorum of the bio reading. Like,
oh no, yeah, you're right.
And then I have some who are just like, don't read my bio at all. I don't care. You can just say my name. This is, who cares? You know what I mean? So I never know if I'm like, which, it's the art world. We're all navigating.
Oh, I appreciate it for sure, but I'm very self-conscious about my artist statement writing. I would rather just like make the art as the artist statement half the time, but yeah.
I know the feeling. So what are you, you just moved into Verge, and you moved into Verge during quarantine, which has made me a little bummed out just because there's so many really interesting artists working at Verge now that are new to me, and everything is so different. So none of us get to spend as much time together as we used to. So what are you currently working on?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. Like, I have a 5-month-old and I like switched jobs. I did like a complete 180. I was teaching art before, and I made like a really labor-intensive transition just to get more into a field that I'm also interested in. But yeah, it was all happening at the same time as COVID started, and also getting like the amazing news of getting into Verge, which I was so happy about. But yeah, I'm still kind of moving in. I'm like, I have sort of a dispersed, messy studio practice in different corners of our house that is like slowly moving over here one chunk at a time. But I'm kind of, in terms of my practice and where it's at right now, I've sort of been transitioning to working 3-dimensionally, which I haven't done since before I was an undergrad. It's been a really stimulating transition. That's what I was doing mostly during our Open Studios live stream stuff, which was really fun. I was really happy you guys forced us / encouraged us to do that. I never would have done it without that. And I got an invitation to do it with a friend of mine, and I might keep doing it with him on a weekly basis. And it's like it was really positive. I was sort of shocked as somebody who doesn't love social media always.
Instagram Live is one of the ways that I've been staying in touch with art during this. Because I used to not really, I still don't go live hardly ever. But a lot of the curators and art spaces that I follow have started doing live formats like Q&As and interviews with curators and artists. And it's been so great. I mean, it's just like, I'll just be hanging out and I'll check social media and some conversation will just, you know, spontaneously pop up, and it makes my afternoon better. So I'm really glad we're like pushing everybody into that world.
Yeah, it was a push I think I needed. I think it's going to make the rest of COVID easier. I don't know. I mean, even without COVID, everybody I went to school with has been like dispersed across the 4 corners of the earth for like every adjuncting job or stable position with a studio or whatever they could find. So I don't know, even after COVID's over, I think it's something like that is going to be a good resource. But yeah, I've been working on these sculptures. I don't know. This is kind of a weird one. Just these sort of like, I mean, I guess they're small. They're kind of, I think they started as mock-ups for maybe larger works. I was working in cement when Aaron and I were still in LA, and I was thinking about scaling some pieces about that scale up. But since I started like working in front of a computer all day, every day, which I guess everybody increasingly is, I started to have like an appreciation for the room that my coworkers who have no real like interest or contact with art, visual art of any kind, sort of the entry point that they have of things on their desk. And something about that just seemed like an interesting, like, I don't know. Yeah, I guess entry point's the best word for it. But but I feel like as I've been kind of like dancing between getting more embedded in like tech culture, which I was kind of like horrified and interested in for a long time after grad school, transitioning to like the workforce as like an art teacher, and kind of seeing some friends of mine transition into like, you know, working for tech companies, and just seeing sort of the difference in those paths in relationship to what's going on in the world right now, and the sort of, you know, different positions of power that like adjunct instructors have versus other workforces. But I feel like there was a lot of really stimulating thought happening there for like the 6+ years I was adjuncting, and now getting like a more first person perspective on the world that those people live in. I've been really interested by the idea of trying to find little entry points for fine art, because there's a really conspicuous absence of fine artists working in tech. It's a population that is super underrepresented. I work with like a lot of people who have never written software before, learning for the first time, and every time I get, you know, since COVID, every month we get 70+ people coming in to our company trying to like transition careers.
Wow.
And we always have 10 or 15 musicians, and it's rare to even get one fine artist or somebody who has a BFA.
Right.
So yeah, I guess I've been kind of occupied by that mentally. I feel like I have my private, like quasi-private studio practice working on these sculptures, and this is the last painting I did, which is like overly depressing. I think I sort of decided I really like that painting a lot, but I had a moment of like some sort of epiphany with this weird little kind of quasi artisan piece of just, I don't know, generic facial expressions communicating sort of like the opposite thing that they seem to be communicating. And I really like that these pieces like make me simultaneously like very happy and like very depressed at the same time somehow. And I've been casting those, I should mention, in urethane resin. So this is kind of like the final product. I don't have a lot of experience in sort of like production, professional style production sculpture. When I did sculpture, it was like very much just like ceramic direct work, and it's been interesting learning like mold making. These are all like block molds I've been messing around with, spending way too much money on those materials, but it's nice to have that freedom, which I have not had before. But that's kind of like the end product for most
I wonder, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few months, especially like the longer that we've been in this. I've been thinking about, you know, when you look at art movements at different time periods, you can kind of see where different things have informed those times, you know, like mechanization or World War I or World War II or the, you know, the GI Bill, you know, all these different time periods that had these really transformative effects on art development. And, you know, everybody is asking each other, you know, what do we think is going to come out of this moment in time? And, you know, it's really impossible to predict that. But I think some of what you're showing us in terms of like, you know, the idea of thinking about things through the lens of a computer screen, and if that's still interesting or whatever, you know, I think that, you know, there's the immediate stuff that's happening right now, especially like the art that's a response to some of the social conversations that we're having, and the social justice conversations, I should say, that are more immediate activist driven. But I think that long term, there's going to be things that will come out of this that are going to be affecting us in a subconscious way that we won't see right away. It's not going to be an immediate, like, I'm currently reacting to COVID. I think it's going to, the way that we our understanding of our environments and our interactions with each other and things are being affected so profoundly that I think that they're going to affect our art making in ways that we can't immediately identify.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to reflect on it even before COVID, you know, just thinking about what from Western art tradition. I mean, I taught art history in conjunction with painting and drawing, and it gave me like a good excuse to think about that stuff and just think about like the transition that we're very slowly undergoing as a community. I think a lot of communities have made a transition into whatever you want to call it, the 21st century, or just tech dominated like culture / economies. a lot of groups have made a transition a lot faster than us, and I always look to musicians because they're sort of, I feel like they're kind of like the closest group that we, or closest community slash communities we have, and it's interesting seeing how I don't know if it's been like a super successful transition from the perspective of a lot of folks, but there are, innumerable sort of not completely like grassroots, but individual musician oriented like platforms that empower them to connect with each other, share their work in a scalable way, and potentially like derive supportive revenue from it. And it's intriguing to me. I mean, I don't know if it's depressing, interesting, or whatever, but it seems like there's still a vacuum for those sorts of things in the field, in the paradigm of visual art. And I think it's going to be really interesting because I don't know, this transition, this COVID related transition, I think is going to push us to find ways to connect with each other and share our work in, a much more scalable and maybe even sustainable fashion. So it's
Yeah,
exciting or depressing. I don't know which.
I can't tell which. I mean, I think that the places where we're missing direct interaction are some of the places that I think will impact what we're doing in ways that we can't measure yet. Because it's just, once you start limiting your interaction with other people, that really changes your influences and just how you perceive things. But at the same time, I do think, like what we've been doing with Stack Up in Studios for the last few days, all of these things have been kind of like micro artist talks,
Yeah.
and some of that I think we would do in the future. And I think having those opportunities even right now has been really cool. And so, but inarguably there's a loss. I mean, there's absolutely, to put a positive spin on it, I think is important, and we all have to do that right now. But I think absolutely there's going to be ways this is impacted that are not positive, and we're seeing that. And the adaptability is going to be an interesting thing to see how we make work through that,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in reaction to that too, since this is a super short conversation, but the sort of like other big thing that I feel like I've probably been working on it like more than I should be, or like over the last year, has been this artist survey that Aaron and I worked really hard on and got help from a handful of other artists as well. Like the Garage on the Grove folks have been really supportive of it, and we've kind of taken a non-promotional stance with it because I think have sort of, because of our personality types, me and Aaron, or because we think it's sort of the right thing to do. But from our position, the idea of making like passive resources, I think, has been kind of attractive. And we basically just like aggregated a non-directed, pretty big data set with like a surprisingly good distribution geographically and demographically. And we just made it open for free as like a kind of quasi, like what you'd call an API, kind of like the information you can get from the government for weather.com, just like open information that anyone can use. But yeah, I mean, there's a hard copy of it behind me. But I don't know. I'm not like plugging it necessarily, but it's really interesting. And it's just, we put all the data at sodasurvey.org, which was for state of the art survey, since stateofthearts.org is taken by a small, I think, theater company. Or Aaron knew what it was. I've forgotten already. But it's a really interesting, I mean, I don't know if there's any conclusion from it. There were like 89 questions on that survey, and I built like a little data cross-referencer to cross-reference questions. So there are conclusions to draw from it that we have not had time to look at. And it's really a really interesting thing to just like look at with a glass of wine, and again, either get like excited or depressed, because you can look up questions that I think as a younger artist I was really interested in, like, specifically I just looked up the other day like if there was a correlation between how many times artists posted on Instagram per week versus how many group exhibitions artists were in for a year. And it's like, you could probably guess that there was a mild correlation,
right.
but like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it like empowerment in that data. And I think I made it as a sort of requiem for giving up adjuncting, which I really loved working with art students. But it was kind of a project that I took on like during my transition time between jobs or careers or whatever. And it's something that we're going to keep doing.
I think it's such a cool project. I mean, it's a really super neat project, and it's a cool resource. And, you know, it's something that I think more people in the region need to be familiar with, because I only became familiar with it pretty recently. So I think it's really super neat.
Well,
So
huge shout out to the Garage on the Grow folks. I
yeah,
mean, really, they've been encouraging people in relation to it. And they did a lot of work to get a really beautiful insert into their most recent zine, which just, it looks
yeah, yeah,
fantastic. I
yeah.
mean,
Here it
yeah.
is again.
Oh, we're hiding because of our newborn. We're so scared. I mean, we're not that scared of COVID, but we're being responsible. And we were very bummed to not go to that opening, and we can't wait to see that in person
Yeah, well, it's understandable. But
soon.
well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time, and I've come to the end of my entire 2-hour shift, which has actually whizzed by. When I started, I was like, whoa, 2 hours. Now I'm like, oh my God, it's over already. But this was great. I'm really glad we got a chance to talk to each other more than we have been recently because of COVID. And I hope we'll be talking even more soon. And so with that, I'm going to say goodnight to you, Tom, and I'm going to turn it over to Amy